Humanity is about to do something we haven't done in over 50 years, and it's happening in just weeks from now. 4 astronauts are about to leave Earth and travel farther into space than any human has gone before. They'll fly around the moon at speeds no one has ever experienced, and when they come back, they'll be screaming through Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour faster than any spacecraft in history. But here's the thing, this mission almost didn't happen. There have been delays, setbacks, and some people even said it was too dangerous to fly. But NASA is pushing forward anyway. This is Artemis II, and it's about to change everything. December 1972, Apollo 17 lifted off from the moon's surface and headed back to Earth. Nobody knew it at the time, but that would be the last time humans would leave the moon for over half a century. The Apollo program had achieved its goal. America had beaten the Soviet Union in the space race, and putting astronauts on the moon was incredibly expensive. So, after Apollo 17, NASA shifted focus to other projects, like the Space Shuttle and the International Space Station. The moon was left behind. For 53 years, humans have only felt the pull of Earth's gravity. We've been stuck in low Earth orbit, circling just a few hundred miles above the planet's surface. Sure, we've done amazing things. The International Space Station has been continuously occupied for over 2 decades. We've learned how to live in space for months at a time, but we haven't gone back to the moon, and we definitely haven't gone beyond it. But that's all about to change. Because right now, sitting on Launch Pad 39B at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, there's a rocket unlike anything we've built in decades. It's called the Space Launch System, or SLS, and it stands 32 stories tall. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty. This thing is a beast. It generates 8.8 million pounds of thrust, which is more powerful than the legendary Saturn V rocket that took astronauts to the moon during Apollo. And sitting on top of this massive rocket is a spacecraft called Orion. This is where 4 astronauts will live for 10 days as they journey around the moon and back. Orion has been in development for years. It's designed specifically for deep space travel, with radiation shielding, life support systems, and everything the crew needs to survive beyond Earth's protection. So why are we going back now, after all these years? Well, because the moon is just the beginning. NASA isn't just trying to repeat what Apollo did, they're building the foundation for something much bigger. The plan is to eventually establish a permanent presence on the moon and use it as a stepping stone to send humans to Mars. But before we can do any of that, we need to make sure everything works. And that's exactly what Artemis II is all about. 4 people have been chosen for this historic mission, and each one of them is about to make history in their own way. Reed Wiseman is the commander. This guy is a former Navy test pilot who became an astronaut in 2009. He's already spent 165 days on the International Space Station back in 2014, so he knows what it's like to live in space. But this mission is completely different. He'll be responsible for the entire crew and the spacecraft, as they venture farther than anyone has gone in over 50 years. Victor Glover is the pilot. He's also a former Navy pilot and became an astronaut in 2013. Glover spent 168 days on the space station in 2020 and 2021. But this mission will make him the first black astronaut to travel to the moon in history. That's a huge moment, not just for him, but for representation in space exploration. Christina Koch is one of the mission specialists, and she's absolutely incredible. Before this mission, she already held the record for the longest single spaceflight by a woman, 328 consecutive days in space. She's also done 6 spacewalks. Koch is about to become the first woman ever to leave Earth's orbit and travel to the moon. And finally, there's Jeremy Hansen, the other mission specialist. Here's what makes Hansen special. He's Canadian. This will make him the first non-American to fly beyond Earth's orbit. Interestingly, Hansen has never been to space before. Artemis II will be his very first space flight. Talk about starting with a bang. These 4 astronauts represent something bigger than just their individual achievements. They represent humanity's return to deep space exploration, and they're putting their lives on the line to test the systems that will eventually take us back to the moon's surface and beyond. So what exactly will happen during this mission? Well, let's break it down. Launch day will be intense. The SLS rocket will generate enough thrust to shake the ground for miles around as it lifts off from Kennedy Space Center. It'll only take about 8 minutes for the rocket to push Orion and the crew into space, but those will be 8 minutes of incredible force and noise. Once in orbit, things get really interesting. About 2 hours after launch, Orion will be pushed into a highly elliptical orbit that means it'll swing out really far from Earth. At one point, They'll be about 44,000 miles away from our planet. For comparison, the International Space Station orbits at just 250 miles up. During this phase, the crew will do something pretty cool. They'll take manual control of Orion and practice flying it around. This is super important because on future Artemis missions, astronauts will need to dock with other spacecraft and the Lunar Gateway Station, so they need to make sure they can actually pilot this thing. After spending about a day in this high orbit, Orion will fire its engines to perform what's called a translunar injection. Basically, this is the big burn that will send them toward the moon. It'll take about 3 days to get there, and during that time, the crew will be testing all of Orion's systems, making sure everything works perfectly in deep space. When they reach the moon's gravitational sphere of influence, something incredible will happen. The astronauts will break the distance record for humans traveling from Earth. That record has stood since 1970, when the Apollo 13 crew had to swing around the moon during their famous survival mission. They reached about 248,000 miles from Earth. The Artemis II crew will go even farther. The spacecraft will fly around the far side of the moon. This means for a period of time, they'll be completely cut off from Earth. No communication, no support, totally on their own. This is one of the most dangerous parts of the mission, but it's necessary to test how the systems perform. Then Orion will use the moon's gravity to slingshot back toward Earth. This is called a free return trajectory. It's actually a safety feature. If something goes wrong, the spacecraft can naturally fall back to Earth without needing to fire its engines. The return journey takes a few days, but it's the final phase that's absolutely terrifying. Orion will be coming back to Earth at approximately 25,000 miles per hour. That's the fastest re-entry speed ever attempted by a crewed spacecraft. For context, when the space shuttle used to return to Earth, it was traveling at about 17,000 miles per hour. This is significantly faster. At these speeds, the spacecraft will experience incredible heat. The friction with Earth's atmosphere will heat up Orion's heat shield to around 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about half as hot as the surface of the sun. Everything depends on that heat shield working perfectly. Here's where things got controversial. Remember that uncrewed Artemis I mission that flew around the moon back in 2022? Well, when that Orion capsule came back, NASA discovered something concerning the heat shield had more erosion than expected. Little pieces of it had worn away more than engineers predicted. This created a huge debate. Should NASA redesign the heat shield before sending humans on Artemis II, or was the existing design good enough? Some engineers raised serious concerns. They argued that flying with a heat shield that performed unexpectedly was too risky. Others said the data showed it was still safe enough, that the underlying structure would protect the crew even if the erosion was worse than planned. In January 2026, NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman made the call. He reviewed all the analysis, met with engineers and outside experts, and decided to proceed with the current heat shield. It was a controversial decision, and not everyone agreed. But the mission was moving forward. But wait, there's more. NASA isn't just doing a regular re-entry, they're doing something called a skip re-entry. Here's how it works. Orion will dip into the upper atmosphere, then bounce back out into space, kind of like skipping a stone across water. Then it'll come back down for the final landing. Why do this? Well, it serves two purposes. First, it helps dissipate some of that intense heat by spreading it across two re-entry phases. Second, it allows for much more precise landing. The spacecraft can basically steer itself to land exactly where the recovery teams are waiting. The plan is to splash down in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego. The U.S. Navy will be standing by with a San Antonio-class ship to recover the crew and the capsule. It's the same basic recovery method used during Apollo, but with modern technology. Getting to this point hasn't been easy. Artemis II was originally supposed to launch in 2024. Then it got pushed to 2025, then early 2026, and now it's scheduled for no earlier than March 2026. So, what kept causing the delays? Well, launching humans into deep space is complicated. NASA needed to make absolutely sure every system was perfect. They had to analyze all the data from Artemis I, build and test the life support systems, and verify that every single component would work. In January 2026, things started moving fast. The massive SLS rocket was rolled out to the launch pad, and set up it took 8 to 10 hours just to get it in position. The crew entered quarantine on January 21st to protect them from getting sick before launch. Then came the wet dress rehearsal. This is basically a practice run where NASA loads all 700,000 gallons of liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen into the rocket and goes through the entire countdown process without actually launching. It's the final major test before the real thing. The first wet dress rehearsal happened on February 2nd, and it didn't go perfectly. There was a liquid hydrogen leak in one of the interfaces. Temperatures were colder than expected, which caused delays. Some communication systems kept dropping out, and the crew closeout took longer than planned. Because of these issues, NASA decided to push the launch from February to March. They wanted time to fix everything and do another wet dress rehearsal to make sure it all worked. The safety of the crew comes first, always. As of right now, the mission is targeting no earlier than the 6th of March 2026. There are launch windows on March 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 11th. If they can't make any of those dates, there are more opportunities in April. But nobody has confirmed an exact launch date yet. They're waiting until everything is absolutely ready. What do you think? Do you think this mission will launch on time in March, or will there be more delays? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, because we're going to be covering every major update on Artemis II from launch day to splashdown.